Elevate your home with Paris Rhone, where style meets function in perfect harmony. Discover their curated collection of premium home appliances and accessories, from sleek kitchen gadgets to innovative living room solutions. Paris Rhone brings a touch of Parisian elegance to your everyday life. Ready to transform your space? For a limited time, enjoy up to 20% off your first order with promo code DARK. Visit parisrhone.com today and elevate your home the Parisian way. Welcome to Dark Crossroads Podcast, hosted by Roxanne Fletcher. This is your stop for all things true crime and paranormal. From the infamous story of the New Bedford Highway Killer to the chilling tale of the Black-Eyed Children, Dark Crossroads Podcast is a truly deep dive into the stories that frighten and fascinate you. All links to the show will be provided in this episode's description. And don't forget to let us know what you think of today's episode. Welcome to today's deep dive into one of Mississippi's most troubling death investigations. This is a controversial story of Christian Andreacchio, a 21-year-old tugboat worker whose life ended on February 26 of 2014, in circumstances that his family insists were far from the suicide ruling initially handed down by authorities. What makes this case particularly haunting isn't just the suspicious nature of Christian's death. It's the cascade of investigative failures, missing evidence, and red flags that followed. Over this episode, we are going to be walking through every detail of this case, examining the timeline, the 911 call that raised immediate alarm bells, the physical evidence that doesn't add up, and the institutional failures that have prevented justice from being served. Let's start this episode with who Christian Shane Andreacchio really was. He was born on November 4th of 1992, and by all accounts, he was exactly the kind of person that you would want in your life. His family and friends describe him with words that paint a picture of somebody who was truly special. Somebody that was family-centered, hardworking, loyal, ambitious, and generous. What strikes me most about Christian's story is how driven he was at such a young age. From the moment he knew what he wanted, which was to work on a tugboat, he pursued that dream relentlessly. He achieved it at just 18 years old, which is remarkable in itself. But Christian didn't stop there. He had sights set on becoming the youngest tugboat captain at his company. And according to his mother, Ray, he was well on his way to achieving this goal. The Magnolia Sun, a nonprofit dedicated to Christian's memory, describes him beautifully. He would send his mother pictures every few days of the sunrises and sunsets along the rivers he traversed, just so that he could share that beauty with her. His friends' descriptions are equally telling. They describe him as somebody who would fight for you when you couldn't fight for yourself. His co-workers remembered him as somebody who would set his boots on fire to get a smile out of a coworker. These aren't just descriptions of somebody contemplating suicide. Christian was also an outdoorsman. He loved riding dirt bikes, spending time at the lake near his family's home, and just being outside with his friends. He was living the life that he dreamed of, working hard but playing harder, as his coworkers put it. So when we look at the events of February 26 of 2014, we have to keep in mind who Christian was. A young man with ambitions, with plans for the future, with people who loved him, and who he loved in return. Now let's talk about his relationship with Whitley Goodman. This is where things start to get complicated. According to Christian's family, particularly his brother Josh, Christian's relationship with Whitley was rocky from the very beginning. In fact, Josh explains in several interviews that Christian had been planning to end things with Whitley and was intending to kick her out of his apartment where she had been living at the time. And this is something that is crucial. Christian had discovered that Whitley had been cheating on him. According to the timeline and phone records, Christian had been trying to reach Whitley repeatedly on the night of February 25th and into the early morning of the 26th. 5 calls that went unanswered between 5:16 p.m. to 12:50 a.m. This context is essential because it sets the stage for what happens next. Let's walk through the timeline of Christian's last day, minute by minute, because the details here are absolutely crucial. On February 25th of 2014, late in the evening, Christian received permission from his boat's captain to leave the tugboat. Now, the reasoning behind this decision depends on who you ask. According to the captain, Christian told him that his sister and father had been kicked out of their home by his mother, and they needed access to his apartment, and only Christian could let them in. This was a lie. Christian's brother, Josh, tells a completely different story. He says that Christian had been discussing with him that he wanted to break up with Whitley and kick her out of the apartment as soon as he possibly could. This makes Christian's brother's version far more credible, especially given the context of the unanswered phone calls and what we know about Whitley's infidelity. At 12:50 a.m. on February 26, Christian first called his friend Justin to ask for a ride back to Meridian. But within minutes, Christian calls Justin back and tells him that somebody else is going to be coming to pick him up instead. That somebody was Dylan Swearingen. At 1:37 a.m., Christian called Dylan asking for a ride. Between 1:37 and 8 a.m., there were 4 calls between Christian and Dylan. Dylan planned to pick Christian up between 7:45 and 8 a.m. This is an interesting detail from the timeline construction. At 4:16 a.m., Dylan is already in Meridian getting gas. At 4:57, Dylan tweets Meridian to New Orleans to Vicksburg and back to Meridian before lunch. It is unknown why Dylan would tweet about a trip to Vicksburg when it never actually happened. At 7:43 a.m., Christian called his mother, Ray, and according to her, this call was quite short. Christian told her that he had to get off the phone to go to work, but he didn't mention that he had already gotten off the boat. On this phone call, they were making plans for a future event, and this was the last confirmed communication Christian had with anybody besides Dylan and Whitley. This is significant because it shows Christian was making future plans. People who are suicidal don't typically make plans for future events with their mothers. At 8 a.m., Dylan picked up Christian near New Orleans. During their drive back to Meridian, a journey that was several hours, Dylan later told police that they stopped for gas and snacks, and that they discussed the issues Christian was having with Whitley. At approximately 11:23 a.m., Christian and Dylan arrived at Christian's apartment. Whitley was waiting here. According to Dylan's own statement, Christian and Whitley began arguing shortly after their arrival. The argument was about where Whitley had been the previous night. Both Christian and Whitley had tracking apps on their phones at this time, so Christian knew exactly where she had been. According to Dylan, Whitley told Christian that she'd spent the previous night at another man's house, a man named Matt Miller, somebody who Christian had mentioned in previous conversations with Dylan. The argument also included discussions about Whitley's prescription drug use. At 11:38 a.m., Christian received a text message from a friend. He never answered this phone call. At 11:43 a.m., just 20 minutes after arriving home, Whitley used what's described as a burner phone to contact Matt Miller, asking him to come get her because Christian was kicking her out. Less than half an hour after Christian arrives home to break up with Whitley, she's already calling Matt Miller on a burner phone. This suggests premeditation. She had this phone already ready for this exact situation. Now here's where the timeline gets even more interesting. After the initial argument, the group apparently settled down to watch a movie. Then Christian asked Dylan to run some errands. Dylan agreed to this, and Christian gave him his debit card and asked him to withdraw all of his money from his bank account. At 12:27 p.m., Dylan called someone referred to as BK who works at a bank. This call lasted 9 minutes. At 12:29, Dylan is captured on security cameras at this bank. He was unable to withdraw any money from Christian's account because obviously it wasn't his account. But here's what's fascinating about the phone records. Between 12:36 p.m. and 12:43 p.m., there is a flurry of text messages and phone calls between Dylan and Christian's phone. 12:36 p.m., Dylan texts Christian's phone. Around this time, a neighbor reported hearing what sounded like a gunshot somewhere between 12 and 12:30 p.m., though she was unsure of the exact time. At 1:06 p.m., bank records show a purchase at a Meridian Chick-fil-A. Dylan had Christian's card, so this places Dylan at Chick-fil-A at this time. According to Dylan's statement, when he returned to the apartment, everything seemed normal. The group watched another movie, and then Christian and Whitley left the apartment to take a little ride, in quotation marks. The group watched a movie, and then Christian and Whitley decided to leave the apartment to go for a drive. After they left, Dylan claims that he fell asleep for about 2 hours. When he woke up, Whitley was sleeping and Christian was on the couch smoking a cigarette. This is Dylan's version of the events, but here is what is critical. Just listen to the phone records. Between 1:32 p.m. and 3:21 p.m., that's nearly 2 hours, there is no phone activity on either Christian's or Dylan's phone. This is highly unusual for young people who, according to all accounts, were frequent phone users. At 3:21 p.m., the phone activity resumes with BK calling Dylan. Then, between 3:44 p.m. and 3:50 p.m., something extraordinary happens. 8 calls are made from Christian's phone to Matt Miller, 2 calls from Dylan's phone to Matt, and 2 calls from a third unidentified caller to Matt's phone. That's 12 calls to Matt Miller in 6 minutes, from 3 different phones. None of these calls were answered. This pattern suggests panic, desperation, or an attempt to establish some kind of narrative. Why would 3 different people all be trying to reach Matt Miller at the exact same time? At 4:15 p.m., Christian's neighbor, Mike Sems, reported seeing a gold Chevrolet or GMC truck parked next to Whitley's silver BMW at Christian's apartment. As he sat in his car, he watched the truck pull out of the parking spot, turn around in the street, and then leave the complex. This is significant because Dylan drove a different vehicle, and neither Christian nor Whitley owned a gold truck. At 4:44 p.m., Dylan called 911. The 911 call that Dylan Swearingen made is, in many ways, the most damning piece of evidence in this entire case. Not because of what he said, but because of how it was said. But I will break it down using forensic analysis criteria developed by Dr. Robert Capel and other experts in this field. The 911 call lasted 3 minutes and 45 seconds. Now, there's a fascinating unpublished study by Dr. Robert Capel that estimated that 19% of all homicide reports are actually phoned in by the offender posing as an innocent individual. Researchers have identified specific linguistic and behavioral patterns that can help us distinguish between guilty or innocent phone callers. They call this the COPS scale or COPS scale, Caller's Objective Patterns of Suspicion. I'm going to go through all of those indicators while I'm also going through the phone call itself. The first indicator is plea for help. In a genuine emergency, an innocent caller's focus should be on reporting the emergency and asking for help immediately. The expectation is that an innocent caller will make an urgent, demanding plea for assistance. Dylan waited until 1 minute and 23 seconds into the phone call before saying, "Please get somebody here." For context, in genuine emergency calls, innocent callers typically beg for help within the first few seconds. Dylan's delayed plea is a red flag. The second indicator is extraneous information. An innocent caller should focus solely on reporting the emergency. A guilty caller, however, may use the call to establish an alibi or try to mislead investigations. Dylan provides his alibi during the 911 call. He stated, in quotes, "I left to go to the store, and he went to the bathroom. I thought he was taking a shower," end of quotation marks. This information was not requested. He volunteered this in the phone call. The third indicator is conflicting facts. Dylan told the operator Christian wasn't breathing and that he was dead. But how would Dylan know this if, by his own account, he never entered the bathroom to check if Christian was breathing or if he had a pulse? He tells the operator, "No, ma'am," when asked if Christian is breathing, with complete certainty. But he later claims that he only saw Christian slumped over the bathtub from the doorway. The fourth indicator is non-responsive remark, which occurs when an articulate caller fails to answer a question or gives a response that's not what was asked. So when the operator asks, "So you think he shot himself?" a simple yes or no would have been appropriate. Instead, Dylan says, "Yes, ma'am, I left to go to the store and he went in the bathroom and I thought he was taking a shower." That's not answering the question, that is inserting an alibi. The fifth indicator is acceptance of death when a close personal relationship exists. When someone has a close relationship with the victim, they typically maintain hope that medical attention might save them, even when there are severe injuries. But Dylan immediately accepts that Christian is dead. He never asks for an ambulance to hurry, never asks if there's anything that he can do to help Christian. He has already declared him dead without checking vital signs. Indicator 6 is inappropriate politeness. In a genuine emergency, especially involving somebody you care about, social niceties kind of go out the window. You're panicked, you're focusing entirely on getting help. Dylan says "ma'am" over 15 times during this phone call. Now, some might argue that this was how he was raised, but if you look at his social media posts, his tweets, comments, the way he was described, he's typically not this polite. The excessive politeness seems performative. The seventh indicator is possession of the problem. In an emergency, the victim possesses the problem. But sometimes guilty callers frame themselves as having the problem. Dylan's very first words are telling. "Ma'am, we got a suicide." Not, "My friend is hurt or somebody has been shot." It's, "We got a suicide." He's made himself part of the problem. Then later he states, "I really need to call somebody in the family," referring to his own family, not Christian's. Indicator 8 is thinking pause. When a caller responds to relevant questions with deflections or filler words like "huh" or "what," this suggests that they need time to formulate their answer. There is no actual strong evidence of this in Dylan's phone call. But indicator 9 is very present, minimizing just. This is when a caller makes statements like "I just got here" to establish that they could not have been involved. Dylan does do this when answering the question about whether Christian shot himself. He immediately provides his alibi without being asked for it. The 10th indicator is one of the most damning, unexplained knowledge. This is when the caller knows things that they shouldn't reasonably know based on their stated involvement. Dylan claims that he didn't go into the bathroom. He didn't see the gun. He didn't see anything. So how did he know that Christian shot himself? For all Dylan knew, Whitley could have shot Christian, or maybe an intruder could have. But Dylan immediately just knew it was suicide by a gunshot. When asked, did he say that he was going to do this, Dylan says, "No, ma'am." So Christian never expressed suicidal intent, but Dylan suddenly knows that it was suicide? That's unexplained knowledge. Indicator 11 is narrative width. It isn't particularly relevant here, but indicator 12 is critical, lack of fear. If Dylan really came home to find his friend dead, and Christian had never said he was suicidal, shouldn't Dylan be terrified that a killer might still be in the apartment? But there's no expression of fear whatsoever in this phone call. The 13th indicator is incorrect order, mentioning less serious aspects before the most serious. Dylan doesn't really show this because he's already staged it as a suicide. And finally, indicator 14, weapon touch. spontaneously mentioning touching the weapon to explain fingerprints or DNA. Dylan does not mention touching the weapon in the 911 call, though this doesn't rule out if he touched it or not. So out of 14 indicators, Dylan's call shows strong evidence of at least 7 or 8 of them. That is a remarkably high score on the COPS COPS scale, suggesting significant deception in this phone call. But there's one more thing about this phone call that's absolutely chilling. At one point during the chaos, you can hear her in the background stating, "It's not my fault." Who says that at the scene of a suicide? Why would anybody need to establish that it's not their fault if somebody had just killed themselves? When officers arrived at Christian's apartment at 5:04 p.m., what they found should have immediately raised red flags. Christian was found slumped over the bathtub with a gunshot wound to his head. According to official reports, he was face down across the bathtub with blood in it. But here's what is strange. Neighbors reported seeing very little blood outside the bathtub, and there was reportedly no blood spatter on the walls or the ceilings, which would be expected with a gunshot wound to the head. The gun was found at the scene, but the positioning of the weapon and the lack of blood evidence does not align well with the suicide theory. Multiple gunshot residue tests were performed. Christian tested positive for gunshot residue on both of his palms, which is consistent with firing a weapon. However, and this is critical, both Dylan and Whitley also tested positive for particles indicative of gunshot residue. Now, the lab reports are careful to note that these indicative particles don't possess the complete mixture for characteristics necessary to definitively identify them as gunshot residue, because these particles could come from other environmental sources. But think about the context. Christian allegedly shot himself in the bathroom while alone. How did both Dylan and Whitley end up with gunshot residue on their hands also? Dylan's official explanation is that he had previously hidden Christian's gun behind a curtain because of an earlier incident where Christian had held the gun to his head. Before leaving for Best Buy, Dylan claims that he returned the gun to Christian and told him to unload it and please don't touch it. That story has problems though. First, if Dylan was so concerned about Christian's mental state that he'd hidden the gun, why would you give it back to him and then leave? And second, handling an unloaded gun would not necessarily leave gunshot residue. That comes from firing a weapon or being so close to one when it's fired. And what about Whitley? How does she have the gunshot residue on her hands? The lab noted that Dylan is left-handed and Whitley is right-handed, but they didn't know Christian's dominant hand, which seems like a significant oversight for a supposed suicide investigation. Then there is the issue of Christian's phone being used after his death. Between 4:48 p.m. and 5:11 p.m., after Christian was already dead, according to the coroner's estimated time of death, multiple phone calls were placed from Christian's phone. At 4:48, 2 calls were made to Whitley's mom. At 4:49, a call to Whitley's aunt, and between 4:50 and 4:55, a call to Dylan's mom and several calls to Whitley and Dylan's family members, but no call to Christian's family. At 5:11 p.m., nearly 2 hours after Christian's estimated time of death, another call was made from Christian's phone to Matt Miller. We know that when police arrived, Whitley was in possession of Christian's phone for a period of time. So, who made all these phone calls? And why were they calling their own families but not Christian's? The investigation into Christian's death was plagued with problems from the very beginning. The first issue is that his death was almost immediately ruled a suicide by the responding officers. There seems to have been very little consideration given to other possibilities despite the numerous red flags at the scene. But it gets worse, much worse. In 2019, after the Culpable podcast brought national attention to this case, the case file was released through the Freedom of Information Act requests. And it wasn't just what was in the file that mattered, it was what was missing. It was discovered that when the case was presented to the first grand jury, Detective J. Arrington's narratives were not included. This is extraordinary because Detective Arrington was one of the lead investigators, and his narratives indicated he believed that the case needed further investigation. In fact, at one point in his narrative, Detective Arrington suggested that Whitley might be responsible for Christian's death. These narratives were simply left out of the materials presented to the grand jury. In January of 2021, CBS's 48 Hours covered the case in an episode titled The Suspicious Death of Christian Andreacchio. And during that episode, the district attorney was interviewed and claimed that Arrington's narratives had been presented to the grand jury. But after further investigation, 48 Hours discovered that this was absolutely not true. The Arrington narratives were not presented to this grand jury. Think about what this means. The grand jury was asked to determine if there was enough evidence to indict anyone for Christian's death. But now everybody is finding out that they were not given all the evidence. They weren't told that one of the lead investigators thought that this was actually a homicide. It took 3 months after the 48 Hours episode aired for the DA to petition for a new prosecutor. She petitioned to have herself recused, and as did the Attorney General's office. The judge granted the DA's recusal, but did not grant the Attorney General's office recusal. Instead, he ordered the AGO to investigate the case and report back to him by September 1st of 2021. But there were other issues too. The case file that was released contained unredacted personal information and autopsy photos. Sensitive materials that should never, ever have been released publicly in that form. I can't even imagine what this family has to go through, knowing the public, people all over, were seeing pictures of their son or brother in the state that they were seeing him in. And remember the neighbor who saw the gold truck leaving Christian's apartment complex at around 4:15 p.m.? That lead was not taken seriously at all and was not pursued. Then there's a matter of Matt Miller, the man Whitley had allegedly been seeing. Multiple calls were made to him from different phones in the hour surrounding Christian's death. But his potential involvement does not seem to have been thoroughly investigated either. In May of 2019, Whitley Goodman and somebody named Jet Miller filed a $47 million lawsuit against the Andreacchio family, their private investigator, and the Culpable podcast. The lawsuit alleged that the Andreacchios, their investigator, and the podcast continuously made false allegations and used defamatory statements about them on social media and in podcast appearances. This is a common tactic in these cases to try to silence the family and supporters seeking justice by threatening them with financial ruin. In 2017, nearly 3 years after Christian's death, warrants were issued for Whitley Goodman and Dylan Swearingen for the murder of Christian Andreacchio. Both parties were arrested and held until their grand jury trial in May of 2017. The Andreacchio family finally thought that they would get justice. But the grand jury determined there was not enough evidence to indict either Dylan or Whitley. Remember, this was the grand jury that never saw Detective Arrington's narratives. The Andreacchio family filed a wrongful death lawsuit in May of 2017, but they later decided not to pursue it and it was dropped. The family has stated that they want criminal charges, not a civil settlement. In 2019, the Meridian City Council voted to request that the U.S. Department of Justice open a new investigation into Christian's death. This request specifically asked for a review of potential corruption in the previous investigation. The fact that a city council felt compelled to request federal intervention speaks volumes about the lack of confidence in the local handling of this case. I'm going to take a step back and look at this case analytically. What would we expect to see in a genuine suicide versus what we actually see in Christian's death? In a typical suicide by gunshot, you would expect several things. First, the decedent would have expressed suicidal ideation to somebody, to a family or friends in writing or online. Christian had done none of these things. In fact, the morning of his death, he was making future plans with his mother. He was planning to break up with his girlfriend and move forward with his life. He was on track to become the youngest tugboat captain at his company, a goal that he was very close to achieving. Second, you would expect the physical evidence to be consistent with self-infliction. The angle of the wound, the gunshot residue pattern, the position of the weapon, all of these things should align. While some of this evidence is not public, what has been released raises questions. Third, we wouldn't expect other people to have gunshot residue on their hands, yet both Dylan and Whitley did. Fourth, you wouldn't expect the victim's phone to be used extensively after their death to call the other people present at the scene's family members, but not the victim's own family. Fifth, you wouldn't expect the 911 caller to show so many indicators of deception on the cops scale. And sixth, you wouldn't expect a complete stranger's vehicle to be seen leaving the apartment complex shortly before the 911 call was made. When you add all of this together, along with the missing investigative narratives and the holes in the timeline, what you have is a death that screams for a thorough, unbiased investigation. Instead, what Christian's family got was a rush to judgment, missing evidence presented to the grand jury, and years of fighting for answers. As of this date, Christian Andreacchio's death remains officially classified as a suicide, though his family and thousands of supporters maintain it was a murder. The Culpable podcast, which dedicated its entire first season to Christian's case, announced a reward of up to $100,000 for information leading to an arrest, and an additional $50,000 if that information leads to a conviction. Christian's mother, Ray Andreacchio, continues to fight tirelessly for justice for her son. In April of 2021, she addressed the Meridian City Council, requesting they investigate unauthorized information being posted on anonymous Facebook pages that appeared designed to hurt her family. The family has also had to deal with the public release of Christian's autopsy photos, which is both traumatizing and deeply, deeply disrespectful. In December of 2019, they filed a lawsuit against Richie McAllister, Meridian's chief administrative officer, alleging that he had shared Christian's autopsy photos with citizens and invited them to view the photos in his office. McAllister denied these allegations, but the lawsuit highlights the secondary trauma the Andreacchio family has had to endure in their quest for the truth. There have been some legislative efforts as well. In January of 2021, Mississippi representatives introduced legislation in honor of Christian Andreacchio, though the specific details of that legislation are not fully public. But perhaps most significantly, a judge ordered the Attorney General's office to investigate the case despite the AGO's request to be recused. That investigation was supposed to be completed by September of 2021. As we near the end of this deep dive, let's talk about the questions that remain unanswered in this case. First and foremost, why did Dylan Swearingen exhibit so many indicators of deception in his 911 call? If he actually is innocent and simply discovered his friend's body, why were all the red flags waving? Second, how did both Dylan and Whitley end up with gunshot residue on their hands if Christian died by suicide? Third, who was in the gold truck that the neighbor saw leaving the apartment complex, and why hasn't that person been identified? Fourth, why were there so many calls to Matt Miller from multiple phones in the period surrounding Christian's death? Fifth, why was Christian's phone used after his death to call Dylan and Whitley's family members, but not Christian's own family? Sixth, what happened during the nearly 2-hour gap in phone activity between 1:32 p.m. and 3:21 p.m.? Seventh, why did Whitley use a burner phone to contact Matt Miller? Eighth, if Christian never expressed suicidal intent, how did Dylan know with such certainty that it was suicide without even checking on him? Ninth, why weren't Detective Arrington's narratives presented to the grand jury? And 10th, what really happened in apartment 801 on February 26 of 2014? The death of Christian Andreacchio is a tragedy compounded by what appears to be a catastrophic failure of the justice system. A young man with his entire life ahead of him died under suspicious circumstances. The investigation was rushed. Critical evidence was either overlooked or excluded from grand jury proceedings. And 7 years later, his families still don't have answers. What makes this case so frustrating is how much evidence there is suggesting that it was not a suicide. The 911 call alone should have prompted a more thorough investigation. The gunshot residue on multiple people's hands, the mysterious truck, the phone calls from Christian's phone after his death, each of these are a red flag. Together they paint a picture of something very wrong. Christian's mother, Ray, has said in interviews that she just wants the truth. She wants Christian's case investigated properly, with all the evidence presented and all the leads followed. She wants justice for her son. And honestly, that is not too much to ask, or it shouldn't be too much to ask. Christian Andreacchio deserves better than a rushed investigation and a questionable ruling. His family deserves answers, and the people of Meridian, Mississippi deserve to know that their justice system works. If you have information about Christian's death, there is still that $100,000 reward available. You can contact the Meridian Police Department, the Lauderdale County Sheriff's Office, or reach out through the Culpable Podcast website. Christian's case has received significant media attention, including the coverage from 48 Hours, Culpable, True Crime Daily, and numerous other outlets. The story has been told and retold, but what's needed now is action. A thorough investigation, accountability for the failures in the initial investigation, and justice. Christian Shane Andreacchio was 21 years old when he died. He was a son, a brother, a friend, and a colleague. He deserves justice. His family deserves the answers, and until they get them, people like us will continue telling his story, examining the evidence, and demanding accountability. Because that is what we owe to Christian, to his family, and to every person whose death is too quickly written off, too easily explained away, and too conveniently closed. Thank you for joining me on today's deep dive into this case. If this story has moved you, please share it, talk about it, keep Christian's name alive, and keep pressure on the authorities to do the right thing. Until next time, remember, the truth matters, justice matters, and Christian Andreacchio matters. The key sources for this episode include Culpable Podcast by Exactly Right Media, Justice for Christian Andreacchio official family website, court documents and public records, and news coverage from local and national outlets. Content warnings for this episode include discussion of death, potential violence, and injustice. This episode is dedicated to Christian Andreacchio and his family. Alrighty, so it's that time, guys, to say goodbye. But before I do so, I just want to send a thank you to all of my listeners for your continued love and support, and for sending in cases that you want covered and stories that you want read on the podcast. We truly accept all stories, including scary, paranormal, and funny. Any cases you want covered or stories that you want read on the podcast, just please send them in to darkcrossroadspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for hanging out again today. You can also find us on all social media platforms. Don't forget to like, share, rate, review, subscribe wherever you're listening to us. You can subscribe to the podcast for bonus information. There is a link in all episodes in the notes that will send you to our subscription page, and with that you will get bonus content, discount on future merch, and a lot of extra goodies. Every single dollar that comes through donations or through our subscription goes straight into the podcast, helping fund research, and it really helps us out and keeps this podcast going. And with all of this said, please don't forget to be weird, stay different, and don't trust anyone. Are you tired of juggling multiple AI platforms? We'll say hello to Babbly, your gateway to the world's premium AI models all in one place. At Babbly, they have revolutionized AI access. Imagine having ChatGPT, Google Gemini, and Claude at your fingertips, seamlessly integrated into one user-friendly platform. That is the power of Babbly. Whether you are a developer, researcher, or just an AI enthusiast, Babbly offers streamlined access to top-tier AI models, a unified, hassle-free experience, and cutting-edge technology with unparalleled simplicity. No more switching between apps or juggling subscriptions. With Babbly, you get the best of AI all in one place. Are you ready to simplify your AI journey? For our listeners today, we have a very exclusive offer. Using promo code DARK10, all lowercase, when you sign up for Babbly, you will get 10% off your first month with Babbly. Don't let complexity hold you back. Join the AI revolution with Babbly today. Visit babbly.com and use code DARK10 for 10% off your first month. Join the crowd at Babbly, simply unlocking AI's potential.